You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz. I'm Polk with Chris Ward, as we have a special episode upcoming of the Renegade Blitz. Steelers fans, this one included, have just seen the newest A Football Life episode with James Harrison. And it was a great episode that chronicled a lot of Harrison's career. And we wanted to make sure we had one person in that covered James Harrison for a book in 2009 about his life at that time. And we're so excited to have this interview. It's been a long time coming. And it's a pleasure to have on Bill Moushey, former investigative reporter with the Post-Gazette, professor at Point Park University, and co-author of Never Give Up, a book chronicling the life of James Harrison alongside his agent, Bill Parise. And Bill, we're glad to have you on the show, man.
I'm elated to be with some of my former students.
Well, Bill, if there's one word to describe the life and career of James Harrison, what would it be and why?
Intensity. Because he's one of the most intense individuals I've ever met. He's very focused. When he gets focused on something, just get out of his way. And that's the way he lived his life. He had a rough and tumble start. He didn't start and got cut 4 times by NFL teams before he stuck with the Steelers. Only started 1 game before he was 29 years old. And he just hung in there, and then he became the best at his position.
And Bill, the path of your career in journalism was investigative reporting, but you did have some overlap into sports, notably the sports about background checks on referees and the PIAA, and your other book, Game Over, on the Penn State scandal and Jerry Sandusky. What inspired you to write a story about James Harrison?
Well, I grew up in northeastern Ohio. He grew up in Akron. I played for a short period of time at Kent State and then graduated from Kent State. He was a Kent State guy. I also played in high school against a lot of the same teams. I'm much older than him, and so there were a lot of things that in common. I knew some of the people that knew him, and so I pitched him on the idea 3 weeks before the Super Bowl, and he not only bought the idea, but also ran a 100-yard touchdown back during the Super Bowl 3 weeks later.
Wow, so you started that actually just 3 weeks before, because the book came out in 2009. That's amazing. I
used to be able to hit deadlines. So, no, it was a fast turnaround, and it worked out really well for all of us.
Yeah, but what was your favorite anecdote? Because you always kind of told us stories about, like, you know, the time in which you had to interview James, and I believe his mother as well. What was your favorite anecdote in getting all of the information for this book?
The whole book is filled with anecdotes, but one of the ones that struck me the most insightful was his mother. I met his mother, who's a bit of a pill, and she started off the conversation with, I don't like white people. And I looked at her and I said, well, thank goodness I'm not white. And then I gave her some flowers. It broke the ice, and she was very gracious, very nice. That's sort of the relationship she has with James, which is her baby, was very clear in the documentary that's out right now, the Football Life documentary, because they don't give each other any slack.
And you mentioned that you and Harrison are both from northeastern Ohio and went to Kent State and played football. What was it like interviewing Harrison at really the prime of his career?
It was it was difficult in the sense that he was still so focused on football that he just didn't want to be bothered during the season with anything, including appearances and all kinds of other stuff. he left a lot of money on the table just because he didn't want to lose focus on what he was doing. So he was not the most outgoing guy that I've ever interviewed. But as we got to know each other over the course of about 80 hours of interviews, he started loosening up a little bit. But he was still playing, so he would not mouth off about other players on the record. He'd mouth off about them off the record. But now I think he's a little more forthcoming now that he's not playing anymore.
And it was James and a mother. Was there anyone else you interviewed for the story?
I interviewed many people from his former coaches, dating all the way back to high school and Kent State, and his former Steelers coaches, a bunch of different players I interviewed, Joey Porter, Jason Gilden. There's a long list of people I spoke to about it.
What was your favorite anecdote from any of those interviews?
Dick LeBeau, when he tells the story about James intercepting that ball during the Super Bowl and running 100 yards down the field, Harrison was out of position and was not supposed to do what he did on that play. And it turned out he instinctually jumped in front of that pass. And LeBeau was saying that, in a few more years, I'll be able to take credit for that. But the fact of the matter was I had James in the wrong place, and he corrected it on the fly. And
you just spoke about Harrison's childhood a little bit, and in the football life, they mentioned that he's the youngest of 14 kids. What was it like, his high school career?
Well, first of all, his dad brought 7 kids into the marriage, both of them second marriages. And then the mom brought 7. So there's 14 there that are all half brothers and sisters of James. And then his mother's sister got murdered by her husband. So 4 more kids moved in with him. So at one time or another, they had 18 kids in that house. And it's a relatively big house, but that's a lot of people in that house. So you practically need a scorecard. There were so many people running around. He got in some trouble, and that caused a lot of people to back off. He didn't have great grades and got in some trouble over some racist incidents. And a lot of schools backed off, so Kent was the only place that gave him an offer.
And what did James think about with the book? Have you kept in touch with him since?
Not much. I've run into him a few times, and he says hello, but he basically read the book, before we sent it to the printer, asked me a couple of questions like, did my mom really say that she hates all white people? And I said, yeah. And he says, all right. And he didn't ask me to change anything, but he looked at me straight in the eyes, which that can be somewhat unnerving, and said, you did a good job. And I said, thank you very much.
Well, the book was published in 2009, and of course, we all know about his great 2009 with the legendary pick 6 in the Super Bowl, and of course, the very storied back end of his career, in which he was cut from the Steelers, he signed with the Bengals, he came back to the Steelers, then he was cut again, and he went to the Patriots to finish out his career. Have you thought about making a second edition of the book, chronicling the events after Super Bowl 43?
Not really. I put my best effort into that, and that's over with. Maybe I'll wait until he establishes himself as the new Rock in the movie industry and write one then. But I just sort of finished it and moved on.
In the football life, Harrison talked about how he wasn't comfortable talking to the media during his career. So it's interesting that he's now an actor and has also appeared on numerous sports talk shows in the past. And as you mentioned, he's a supporting role on the wrestling show called Heels, a Starz drama on the life of professional wrestlers. Have you watched any of these or the football life that premiered a couple days ago?
I did watch the football life this morning, actually. And they did a very good job with it. They depicted him accurately, and he is. It is what it is with him.
So I guess the big question is, Harrison has a lot of things going with him towards a potential run to the Hall of Fame. 5-time Pro Bowler. He was on the All-Pro team a few times. He's the first undrafted player to win the Defensive Player of the Year. Do you think that he's one of those guys that will eventually get into the Hall of Fame, or is it not likely?
I think it's not likely myself. Probably because there are so many Steelers in there already, and the voters are starting to get Steelered out. But he certainly had a run that was as good a run as anyone's ever had in the history of that league, I think. I mean, what do you have, 15 and a half sacks the one year? And Jesus. I was at the Baltimore game when he basically was a one-man wrecking crew. No one could block him. And asked Joe Flacco about that. He's probably still feeling the hits. But no, he had an unbelievable run. You know, maybe he'll get in. I don't know. I mean, you can make an argument for him to get in, that's for sure. But I just think that, you know, there's a lot of Steelers in there already.
And Bill, being that you went to Kent State during the early 1970s and played 1 year on the football team, did you play with Jack Lambert and Nick Saban? And what was Lambert like? If you ever saw him on camera, did you play with him?
Yeah, I did play with him. And Saban was a graduate assistant my 1 year playing there. He just graduated. And he stayed at Kent as a graduate assistant because his girlfriend, now wife, was not graduated yet. So he just hanged around for 1 year as an assistant. Yeah, okay. And then as far as Lambert goes, as a kicker, the kickers had to tackle the middle linebackers in practice every day in a drill. And Lambert thought I ran too fast to try to get by him in the drill the previous time, so he decided he was going to teach me a lesson. So he jumped in front of the line when I was getting set to run the ball again in a tackling drill. And he hit me under my chin. I went up about 3 feet in the air, and then he grabbed me by my ankles and spiked me. And I said, Jesus, I'm a kicker. You're trying to break my legs. And he says, you're trying to make me look bad. And I said something how I could make him look bad with a baseball bat or something like that. But that was the end of my career there. That's when I also realized that I was not a high-end football player either.
So you were a kicker there, or did you play just a kicker? What was Saban like as a graduate assistant coach? And, you know, arguably now he's the greatest college football coach of all time.
I didn't have that much association with him, but he was known back then as a meticulous planner of things. Everything what would be on a clock and everything. And he basically learned from Don James, who left Kent after that year and went to University of Washington, where he had a long, storied career himself. But I didn't know Saban that well.
Okay. Anything else about Lambert, or did you run into him when he was in Pittsburgh at all, or do you have any other stories about him?
No, I didn't. I always thought he was sort of a jerk, to be honest with you. At Kent State, I saw people hit him in the head with beer bottles about 3 times, and because he was just a person that didn't like people. It didn't seem to me. And in football, he basically was in on every play. At Kent, he was really something. That's the same with James Harrison at Kent. He was in on about every play.
Yeah, they mentioned during the football life that he had 5 sacks on Roethlisberger when he was at Miami, Ohio. That was a pretty interesting story there.
Yeah, he didn't have a lot of favorable things to say about him, but he wouldn't go on the record with me. But I know that they would get on each other about how many sacks Harrison had against him.
That article he had, I think it was with like GQ or something like that. Yeah, he had to walk those back in 2011. But hey, that's just how it is. He's a very intense individual. You can just tell from everything that you see from him from afar. And but last question, what are your thoughts on the Steelers this year? We're recording this before the Bengals game, and you kind of went a little bit off the record there, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting game and season.
Yeah, I think as far as the Steelers season, if they get many more injuries, they're going to have a rough way to go. And they've already got some devastating injuries. So I think they're going to be about a 50-50.
So Chris had them 7-10. I had them 10-7 because I just don't know any better. But hey, that's how it is. It's a long season, especially with the extra game. But Bill, you've been a great influence on both of our careers, especially my career, as I've always been running around doing just about anything. So really, thank you for your time, and thank you for the 4 years of guidance in terms of that. And I still use every single one of those lessons you had, and every anecdote that you ever mentioned. It was kind of like indirectly going like, you got to get these every time you do a journalism story. And thank you so much.
You're quite welcome, and your words humble me. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bill. I really appreciate it.
Take care of yourself, Chris.
So that was Bill Moushey, former investigative reporter with the Post-Gazette, professor at Point Park University, and co-author of Never Give Up, a book chronicling the life of James Harrison alongside his agent, Bill Parise. Bill, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, fellas. Have a great day.
And that's all for us. For Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning into this special episode of the Renegade Blitz. We will have the recap episode for Steelers-Bengals coming out later in the week, and we'll also have a reporter for the Steelers' next game. So long, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.